In 2018, there were over 200 reported hate crimes against LGBT people in Nigeria. Now, these were crimes carried out by fellow citizens, individuals who felt empowered to carry out acts of hate against another human being simply because of their sexuality.
They came down from the bus with guns and they had their uniform. So they asked me to bring out my ID card, which I did. And one of them said I was looking like a lady in my ID card.
I didn't remember to be scared. I just pictured the end. I tried to imagine how this tragedy was already going to play out.
So the boy was trying to escape, but it was too late. They dragged him back, they started beating him, everything. At the end of the day, I don't know where they take him to.
Now, there's certain fundamental rights that every Nigerian citizen is entitled to. The right to privacy, the right to life, the right to freedom of association and assembly. Actually, hold that. Because LGBT people in Nigeria have that last right, the right of freedom to assembly and association, severely limited.
Is there ways in which we use legal structures and violence and oppression to determine someone's ability to live fully?
I think this is why we're here, to increase people's knowledge of their rights.
So I'm very happy to know that the statistics, the data is showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming more aware of the real life implications of these laws. Because I think when people don't understand that these laws affect people on a day-to-day basis, then they're less likely to care. So I'm really happy.
Change is coming. It's slow. It's taking a while, but it will surely come.
None of us is free until all of us are free. This is how we can have a more inclusive and a more diverse society. My name is Arit Okpo. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone and welcome to Untold Facts. I'm Arit Okpo. Now, there's certain fundamental rights that every Nigerian citizen is entitled to. The right to privacy, the right to life, the right to freedom of association and assembly. Actually, hold that. Because LGBT people in Nigeria have that last right, the right of freedom to assembly and association, severely limited. So today we're going to take that apart. We're going to see what this means for the everyday Nigerian citizen when their rights are deemed not to be as valid, in a manner of speaking. Joining me today is Chiedozie. He's a lawyer, and you're very passionate about exploring how the law and sexual minorities intersect.
Yes, I am.
It's really great to meet you.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
And then we have the wonderful, you know I'm going to now become unruly because it's you. All right. But we have Chioma Ogwuegbu, and she's a researcher with a focus on social activism, women's rights, and sexual rights. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Now, the law is something that a lot of people are overwhelmed by. So I think we tend to shy away from that. So, Chiedozie, why don't you give us just a brief overview when we say freedom of assembly and association? What does it mean for the everyday citizen?
As it implies, freedom of association, that's the right to belong to a group, the right to belong to a particular community, the right to assemble freely within that community, the right to, really associate the way I'm associating with you. So it's a basic human right that's common to everybody, but, it's something that's stifled by the SSMPA in the lives of LGBT in Nigeria.
So what is it about the SSMPA that affects that right? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, first of all, Section 40 of our Constitution, 1999 Constitution, guarantees every person, every citizen of Nigeria the right to associate and then to assemble. Importantly, the right to belong to any group, the right to form any group, a trade union, any organization of his choice, and as to protect his interests. In fact, the Constitution was specific, to protect his interests. So basically, it's a total right that is guaranteed to every citizen.
So if Chioma and I decide to form a group based on our mutual love of dreadlocks and the color orange, that's our right?
Yeah, definitely it's definitely a right. But there is a qualification, I must say, in Section 45 that says, insofar that there's a law, if there's a law that provides or seeks to derogate from a right to association, basically, it shall be valid to the extent that it promotes public order, public morality, public health, and in the interest of public defense.
So basically, you can not assemble if it's affecting public order, public health, public safety, if it's affecting
public
security,
defense.
public defense.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, okay. I'm keeping up with that. So what is it about the SSMPA that then stifles that law?
Now, the SSMPA, particularly in Section 4 and 5 of the Act, provides or seeks to restrict the registration or the operation of gay societies, of processions, of marches. And so you can't even have a gay pride, for instance, or LGBT pride, which is basically a march or a procession. And in the backdrop of what freedom of association should generally be, or what it is, you can see that it seeks to stifle it, it seeks to derogate from the general provisions of the Constitution. Because if you're saying, on the other hand, that somebody cannot associate, cannot sit down, cannot march, cannot protest, in the protection of his own interests, as said by Section 40 of the Constitution, then you can see that it's very inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution.
So I have a question, which is that when you have what is a general right, and then you have a law that stands against, or that right.
A kind of conflicts.
Yes. So is there like? Yes.
Yeah, basically, by the provisions of our same Constitution, if a law is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution shall be supreme and prevail upon any other such law. So basically, in the light of the exceptions and qualifications that I had mentioned, and in the light of what Section 4 and 5 of the SSMPA that seeks to restrict the freedom of association rights that is guaranteed to everybody. So you can see that, I mean...
Chioma, you felt like, it looked like you wanted to say something.
No, I was actually going to agree with him to say that the Constitution is what we call the ground norm.
The ground norm, exactly.
So it supersedes every other legislation. And so it would supersede, on the face of it, the SSMPA.
So, I'm asking these questions as a complete novice. I'm exploring this thing. So this means that if I want to stage a march, or maybe just have like a meeting of people, am I contravening the SSMPA, or am I abiding by my constitution? Do you understand? Because which one do I pay attention to?
Well, I would say it's a sad situation we find ourselves in Nigeria, to having to make this, to be in this sort of dilemma, and to make this kind of choice. Because if, like she said, if the Constitution is the ground norm, we shouldn't be talking about any other law that is inconsistent with the ground norm, and then having to consider it in the light of the ground norm.
Yes.
But then it's sad that it's something that people in the sexual minorities and the LGBT it's a challenge they face every day.
Yes.
And that stifles their humanity, of course, and their human rights as given to them by the Constitution. So what my answer to that would be, in the face of the Nigerian scenario and the face of the Nigerian context, would be to, of course, for the protection of, to avoid, how we could, people in this LGBT arena could get harassed. And so as much as possible, we should try as much as possible to still observe the status quo, but we should try as much as possible to try and see how we can start shifting the discussion to make it, to make it more pronounced that this is what is in the Constitution, and to this extent, the SSMPA is not something we should be paying attention to, rather than the Constitution.
And I would also say, if your gathering does not detract from public order, public peace, public morality, then I don't think that it should be a problem, really. Yes. So I would say that maybe still have your gatherings, but just be aware of where we find ourselves, basically, of the
Nigerian situation.
Yes, the Nigerian situation where people, LGBT persons, are currently being stifled. But it doesn't mean that by your gathering is illegal, so to say.
This is very interesting. Okay, so you did a survey recently, Chioma, and you explored perceptions general perceptions about LGBT people. Now, there was something very interesting about the right to association, freedom of association. But first, let's tell us some of the other exciting discoveries or some of the trends.
Okay, well, I have to say that this result or this report or this research was the findings were very exciting for me, because what we did was that we did, as you know, TIERS and NOI polls had started doing a survey, they've been doing polls since 2013 to kind of understand the perceptions of Nigerians generally about LGBT rights issues. And so it's not something that we just did today. So it's like we've done like baseline surveys of these same questions. So for instance, and we find that there's a significant improvement. So for instance, would you accept a family member if they were homosexual? So in 2015, 2017 even, it was about 90% of Nigerians who said no. Okay,
yes, I remember that.
Yes, but now it's about 70% of Nigerians. Really? So it's like there's beginning to be more acceptance. And then something like support for even the SSMPA has decreased. So in 2015, it was 77% of Nigerians who supported it. But currently, it's about 57% of Nigerians who support it, meaning that a good number of Nigerians who supported it that time have now, like, maybe given more information, maybe through the media, maybe through advocacy work, have now seen that support for that law does not make sense. So a lot more people are now beginning to reduce their support for it. But even with the right to assembly, it's like all the different indices. So there are other questions where we asked about, okay, how do you perceive these social LGBT persons? Like, should they assemble? All those kinds of questions. People are now like, look, they have the right to assemble. So for instance, in 2015, it was about 60% of Nigerians who said they did not have the right to assemble. But now it's more like 40% of Nigerians say that they have the right to assemble. So last time it was 40% of Nigerians who said they had the right. But now it's increasing now. So rights to assembly, like everyone, one of the things, that's where was one of these places where we noticed a significant improvement. So in 2015, it was 8% of Nigerians who agreed that LGBT persons needed to have the same rights. But then in 2019, it has increased to 13% of Nigerians. Really? And then even the number of people who are no longer sure. So in 2015, it was about 15% of Nigerians who were not sure about their responses. But now that has increased. And what that means is that if you ask me a question and I don't want to say yes outrightly, I say, I'm not sure. So what we do most times is we put the people who are not sure under people who could actually say yes. So it means that ultimately, more people think that people who LGBT persons have a right to assembly. So more and more people are beginning to think that. And then even things like access to public services. Before, it was just 30% of Nigerians who thought about that, but now it's 42%.
When you say public services, what kind of public services are we talking about?
I think generally should mean access to healthcare,
housing,
access to education.
Okay, all right, okay.
So and the thing that amazes me is this is just in a space of 2 years, 2 to 3, 4 years. That's where we're having this many changes. The only thing that I think that we were discussing was one result that we were discussing was the result of so we saw that there are fewer people who said that they are aware of LGBT persons. So it's from in 2015 it was about, I think, 90% of Nigerians who said that they didn't know, but it looks like the numbers have reduced in 2019. And one of the reasons we think or we suppose might be because people are more shy to say that they know someone who is an LGBT person. It could be something in research where we call social bias. So because you're asking them that question, they don't want you to associate them with somebody who is an LGBT person. So they'll just say, I don't know anybody, even if they do. So that could be what could be in play here. It could also be that it's actually the SSMPA itself, because they know that there is a law that says that people of a particular orientation should not congregate or associate with themselves. So they would rather not say that they know people, even if they do. So I think that's probably, so that's probably why. But I think generally, when we reviewed all the results, we find that people are becoming more, Nigerians are becoming a bit more open to LGBT persons, their rights. They understand that people should have the right, no matter whatever your sexual orientation, you should have the right to associate with whomever you want to. To assemble. And so, anyway.
See, there are so many things to explore, and there's something that keeps striking me, which is when you were talking, I had some conflict about, but there's this law and there's this law, and they seem to be in direct opposition. And the thing that keeps hitting my head is that there are implications for this for even people who are not LGBT, right?
Yes.
What are the ways that this would even affect people who are not LGBT?
Well, firstly, I would like to think that as regards how it will affect people that are not LGBT is basically what the definition of human rights basically is, you know, because there has to be like a uniform definition of what exactly is a human right.
Yes.
So if one person on the one hand was saying freedom of association applies to every human, right?
Yes.
And then on the other hand we are saying okay, it applies to people, but then certain other persons are excluded. Even for the non-LGBT person, it creates a sort of first of all, it increases the bias against LGBT people.
Yes.
And then secondly, it creates a sort of a problem and sort of trying to understand what the limits of human rights basically can be. It just shows that it's at the whims and caprice of the law. So I think that's a major reason and a major potential threat to.
It is because when you're saying, for instance, that there are fewer people who say they know someone who is LGBT, which is very strange. You know, because under normal circumstances, it should be the other way around, where knowledge continues to increase. Then you're thinking about the fact that the average Nigerian, on some level, understands that no matter what my laws or my rights are on paper, the reality can be something different. And I noticed that you were very careful when you said, you know, and you're in Nigeria, so be mindful of how you associate. But under normal circumstances, you should be able to associate. You know, do you think that there is a journey from the legal perspective and for you as an observer of these social trends to where we can change this so that more people are actually positively, you know, for LGBT people, for the right to assemble, for access to public services?
I think it's something that, like we have seen, even just from the research, is something that requires gradual effort, you know. So I think why this kinds of research is good is that it helps us measure what we have been doing to be sure that we're actually making some impact. So I think that change will come, but it might not come as quickly as you and I expected, but it will come. It's just so long as we are sure that we're doing the same things that we're doing and we're reaching more people, giving people more knowledge. If I feel like the more that there is knowledge out there, the more that people can humanize, in quotes, LGBT persons and relate them to themselves, then there's a higher probability of us changing into. For me, from these results, I feel like there's a growth. There's already a change. We just need to keep consolidating on that change.
That makes a lot of sense. And legally?
Well, for me, basically, I think we should utilize social media. It's important because now we need to understand if a matter has to go to court, the lawyers will be looking what's the wordings of the statutes, what's the wordings of the act. So if the SSMPA says, okay, you cannot protest, you cannot march, right? That you cannot do that, but you cannot organize prides. We can utilize the social media, right? Because if you utilize, identity is not criminalized. That's one thing I'm certain of. It's not criminalized. What's criminalized is the acts that are contained in the acts and the statutes. So basically, the LGBT persons generally should be able to, you know, not necessarily flaunt their identity, but then should be able to, you know, utilize the social media to express themselves, express their identity, and then it's Pride Month. So, you know, through the social media, which is in no way criminalized under the SSMPA, you know, we can be able to like make a serious change going forward. So it's one thing, it's a very peculiar thing. And secondly is we should move for the repeal of the law. It's important if Section 1, Subsection 3 says any law that is inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid, and so what we should be doing as lawyers, and I mean it behoves on us and like lawyers to come together. So I think last year there was somebody tried to move for the repeal of the law, but I don't know how far it went with that. So we need to push, because it's affecting, I mean, justice to anyone is justice to everybody, it's a threat to everybody in the world. So we need to come together and then, you know, make sure fundamental human rights that is guaranteed to everybody is enjoyed by everyone.
Chioma, what would you say are the implications of this data for like human rights organizations, for legal cases like this, even for the everyday person who is not sure how much of themselves they can show on social media, offline? What would you say are the implications?
First of all, I wanted to, can I digress a little?
Sure.
Okay, so I wanted to say, when you asked, there was a question you asked about what are the implications for non-LGBT persons.
Yes.
And I wanted to say that it's kind of, we're now on a slippery slope, because it means that even if you are non-LGBT, there could be some of your fundamental rights that could be limited to taken away from you tomorrow, because look, it's the law. So if you just sit down and fold your hands and say, maybe they're talking about LGBT persons, it might be you next. So it's why we, or whoever is non-LGBT, should be vocal and interested in seeing that that law is either repealed, basically. So what are the implications for people who work in advocacy and for everyone, basically, for this research? Is that it shows you, like I said, that we're not, our work is not in vain for people who work in advocacy. For LGBT persons, it just means that, look, people might be spouting some other things, government might be saying some other things, but the actual fact is that we actually have more support than we know. You know, so to not feel isolated, you understand? Not feel like it's just us, we're battling on our own. There are actually more people that support you than you know, and that let's not feel like there's no hope, basically.
So there's a young person reaches out to you, somebody reaches out to you and says, I'm LGBT, I want to organize a party, or I want to organize a march. What would your advice be?
Well, first of all, let me quickly highlight what Section 4 of the SSMPA says.
Okay.
It seeks to prohibit the operation of gay societies, gay meetings, gay processions, and the rest. So, if you want to organize a party, organize your party. You have every right to organize your party. It's a right that's guaranteed to you under the Constitution. So, basically, organize your party. There's nothing that prohibits you or stops you from organizing your party, including the SSMPA.
Okay.
As long as it doesn't expressly contravene what is written in the SSMPA, in the sense that probably there are no gay activities in quote unquote in the party. You have a right to organize your party. So I mean, basically, I would tell you to organize your party, but then ensure that for your safety and to avoid harassment. There was a TS report last year that I came across, and I found out that there were about 247 reported cases of violence against LGBT persons. So that's a staggering amount, a staggering number. So it just means that, I mean, LGBT persons in the minority need to be careful. So I would advise that they are careful to the event, that you do not, as much as possible, try to ensure that there are no gay activities in court.
You know my problem. I have one problem, which is that you guys are breaking this thing down, and it seems perfectly clear to me. But yet, young people were arrested. Young people who were having a party. They were arrested because somebody decided that they were gay. So we have what looks like the theory of the law, which I'm listening to you both, and it seems very clear. Why is the reality so different?
Because Nigeria.
Because this is Nigeria. In Fauzi's word, this is Nigeria.
Well, I think that the more people actually challenge the cases or situations where the police is arresting people, if you don't have the knowledge, and I think this is why we're here, to increase people's knowledge of their rights. So the more knowledge that is out there, the better it is, or the easier it is for people to actually stand up to police and say, look, we're here lawfully. This is a lawful assembly. So of course it's not something that can change today or change tomorrow. The police is still the police, and it still needs us as advocates to also continuously engage the police as well, because we think that the average policeman on the road who is doing the stop and search, or the one who is going to go and arrest people, is aware or is knowledgeable to the extent of understanding what the Constitution says, but they are not, or they might not be. So as much as we're engaging LGBT persons about their rights, we're also engaged.
Expand that conversation.
Sure. I totally agree with her. I totally agree, because if we can, through this avenue, through this forum, and then in the broader narrative, continue to engage the entire public, so people are aware of the laws that exist, and then the true status and nature of these laws, I think will probably, a significant amount of change will be produced, at least over time.
What is the one thing I think you would like people to take away?
Well, for me, I would like to remind everybody that you have your human rights. It's inalienable. It's something that comes to you by virtue of being human, and no law and nobody, no government should be allowed to take it away from you. So you have it's in your best interest to make sure that you're aware of that, and then you try as much as possible to resist any opportunity for such rights to be derogated and taken away from you. And then the freedom of association right is a very important right, because you need to be able to interact with people of like minds in order to make sure that your interest is secure. So for those, especially in the LGBT space, it is important that as much as possible we try to use, the social media and any form of opportunity we can within the means of the law to connect together and then always brainstorm on how to make sure that the entire country is a safe space and place for everybody. So that's what I would say.
Okay, so mine will be more about, I guess it's more on a, I don't know, intellectual or esoteric level, but it will be more to kind of encourage people who work in this space and to encourage LGBT persons and advocates and everyone to say, look, change is coming. It's slow. It's taking a while, but it will surely come. So that will be my takeaway.
It's such a hopeful note to end this on. As we started this conversation, it felt to me like, okay, so everybody has these rights. But there are certain people for whom, you don't have the same privilege of rights, of claiming your fundamental human rights. So I'm very happy to know that the statistics, the data is showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming more aware of the real life implications of these laws. Because I think when people don't understand that these laws affect people on a day-to-day basis, then they're less likely to care. So I'm really happy. That's such a wonderful and very hopeful note to end on. Because, when we started this conversation, all I could hear was that there are certain people who don't deserve the same fundamental rights, because that's kind of how this makes you feel. And I'm really happy to hear that the data is changing. It's showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming aware of how these laws affect others on a day-to-day basis. I'm so happy to hear that, there are ways that you as an LGBT individual can engage with the law, that you have these rights, that, the law, like any other law, must be put to work and made to protect the rights of the citizens that exist. Of course, we must assert that you have to be careful. Please don't take any risks, but also make sure that you know what the law says. Get familiar with human rights organizations, get support, and let's see the little that we can do in our own individual spaces to make sure that every human being's fundamental rights are protected, no matter who they are. My name is Arit Okpo. Thank you for watching. In 2018, there were over 200 reported hate crimes against LGBT people in Nigeria. Now, these were crimes carried out by fellow citizens, individuals who felt empowered to carry out acts of hate against another human being simply because of their sexuality.
They came down from the bus with guns and they had their uniform. So they asked me to bring out my ID card, which I did. And one of them said I was looking like a lady in my ID card.
I didn't remember to be scared. I just pictured the end. I tried to imagine how this tragedy was already going to play out.
So the boy was trying to escape but it was too late. They dragged him back, they started beating him, everything. At the end of the day, I don't know where they take him to.
Now, there's certain fundamental rights that every Nigerian citizen is entitled to. The right to privacy, the right to life, the right to freedom of association and assembly. Actually, hold that. Because LGBT people in Nigeria have that last right, the right of freedom to assembly and association, severely limited.
Is there ways in which we use legal structures and violence and oppression to determine someone's ability to live fully?
I think this is why we're here, to increase people's knowledge of their rights.
So I'm very happy to know that the statistics, the data is showing that perceptions are changing, that people are becoming more aware of the real life implications of these laws. Because I think when people don't understand that these laws affect people on a day-to-day basis, then they're less likely to care. So I'm really happy.
Change is coming. It's slow. It's taking a while, but it will surely come.
None of us is free until all of us are free. This is how we can have a more inclusive and a more diverse society. My name is Arit Okpo. Thank you for watching.